We're coming to you today from the Penn Stater Conference Center in State College with a very special edition of Take Note, where we're giving some PMEA updates on today's PMEA's Take Note podcast. Well, hello everybody, I am Mark Despotakis. Welcome to this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. As I said, we are coming to you from the Penn Stater Conference Center in State College as part of the PMEA Leadership Summit. You can see I have some guests here. We're going to introduce them in a minute, but we have something really special today. For the very first time, we have a live studio audience for our podcast. So welcome to our studio audience. They are very excited. That's what we like. So they are all here as part of the PMEA Leadership Summit. These are leaders in PMEA, and we're going to talk about what that is here in a second. Before we do that, I want to introduce our guests here today, PMEA's Executive Committee. Scott Cullen, immediate past president, Brett Keith, president, and Becky Sensor, president-elect. Thank you guys for being here. You don't have a choice, but thanks for being here.
No, Mark, what an honor to be able to be here in front of everybody to actually do this live and take fun, or not take fun in this, but have some fun and be able to share this not only with the people in the room who may have already heard some of this at the summit, but also to the folks who are listening who maybe not be present today, but get to take part in this podcast, in a couple of weeks.
Right. So talk about what is this? Talk about the Leadership Summit. What is this? We know the summer conference, but this is the second year for a Leadership Summit. What are we doing here?
So giving just a quick, very brief history of what this event was. Years ago, we would meet in July as PMEA and have our summer professional development conference. And we did some soul searching a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, to say, we've received some feedback in where we want to go as an organization, what some of our members are wanting, what we want to see as a direction of that organization. And from that feedback, we saw that there was a need for the development of leaders within our organization, but also for engagement through our membership as well. Knowing that it's not just people with titles, that it's all of us working together for the same goal. So in that transformation, the conference turned into kind of a hybrid event where it's an opportunity to gain some professional development in becoming a leader and what your role is and what you can do, and to discover yourself and how you can impact change and impact others. But also it's an opportunity for us as those leaders, as we're working through that journey, to be able to determine how we can affect that change specifically for our organization, how we can take that change and work statewide, but also at the district and the region levels in our very, I don't want to say isolated, but in very specific areas of the state within our regions, but also within our schools and our communities for our students too. And so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go.
No, I was going to say, and so now we're in the second year of that, and this year is actually very different than what it was last year. Last year was kind of a brainstorm of what we wanted to see from our organization, what we could do better. And this year, we are taking that as an opportunity to actually get down and find some tangible goals, to the point where with our guest speakers, with Anne Marie Stanley from the Penn State School of Music, to Cameron Jenkins talking about leadership, but to the work of what's happening through the upcoming strategic plan, we were able to kick off the very beginning of that work with this group here over the past 2 days. And we know, again, it's just scratching the surface, but it's going to start to guide us on how we then can engage our members further within that process so that our membership guides the work of what we do.
Yeah, so let's talk strategic plan. I mean, we spent a couple hours yesterday in that initial stage of it. I guess, talk about what is a strategic plan. What is the need for a strategic plan? Let's start there before then we dive a little deeper into it.
I'll talk a little to that. Strategic plan, to me, the way that I think of it, is more of a direction and not a destination. And it's something that there's often a misconception that the people who we elect, the leaders, they come in with this vision and they're going to do what they want to do, when really the most the most important tool, the most important aspect that a strategic plan brings for us is that we are informed by the direction in which the membership wants to go, and that helps us realize the desires, the wants, the needs of our membership. I was involved in a strategic planning process multiple times. We just kicked this off, and when we have this provides the wind in the sails for people like Becky, who will be coming in under a strategic plan, and she doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. She knows exactly which direction that we're going, and that the person after Becky will know which direction we're moving, and then when that new plan comes around, we decide, are we going to continue moving this way, or do we need to reevaluate? So plans give us our focus, they give us our identity. The strategic plan really grounds us in what we're doing and provides that path forward.
So there's a lot that goes into this, right? For this size of an organization to try to, in a state as diverse as Pennsylvania, we're going to talk a little process.
Yeah, and Mark, you actually kind of took a point I was just going to make, is that when you look at an organization as large as PMEA with over 3,700 members, you're talking collegiates, you're talking educators from all different levels, content areas from across various different geographical areas of the state. There are a lot of ideas and a lot of programs and a lot of individual visions and wants and needs. And so that process has to consider all of those needs and wants. And so with an organization as large as PMEA, I said it's the lovely mess that we have as an organization, because we can do so much, but man, how do you organize it? So part of that process, like I said, we started that work here yesterday with Scott Sheehan, who was helping us kick off that process. And so that initial work was trying to figure out who we are as an organization, identifying the reasons of why we do the work. That's where we become aligned within the differences within the jobs that we do and the roles that we play. So part of the process was originally finding what is our why, and then to determine then the hows and the whats, as we discussed. And then as we determine the whys, that gives us an identity. It gives us our goal, and that's the motor that's driving the car. And so it's then going to point you to those certain directions, but when you get off at those certain directions, there's going to be other things that spoke out from that. So the process, again, it seems like it's happening fast, but it will come quickly, because that time will fly. So we've got the input from the folks who are here, talking about leadership, who've had the experience and are learning about who we are as an organization, to then where we are going to create a committee and compile a committee of individual members from varying perspectives, varying content levels, very educational levels, so that we can get the broad perspective of who we are as a state and who we are as an organization and what we do. So that committee can then really get down to the nitty-gritty, determine how we survey and how we respond to members and engage the actual members across the state. 3,700 people plus is a lot. But also at the same time, too, trying to gather the perspectives of non-members. What can we do to help those people who may not be with us? Because if that's part of our mission, we need to understand maybe why they might not be a member, or how we determine that process. It's not just for us to grow, but if we're going to talk about music in our roles and our whys, that's part of our process too. So to be able to engage those members and converse with them through town halls, through those additional meetings one-on-one, and through our leadership as well, then we can start to get down and take all of that data and all that input from our individual members and our leaders, and start to synthesize that into what is our plan for this organization. We've figured out our why. Now we're going to determine the what's, and then we start to determine the processes of hows, and including, you might even add another element of when does that occur. And within that strategic plan, knowing that we're going to embed this into our plan, but it might be something that ends up going further than a current strategic plan or longer, because it might be a long-term goal for our organization. So I know it's a very long-winded answer, but it's a process, and it's worth the work. for us to be able to do that.
And gathering as many different perspectives as we can. I mean, we have a cross-section of the membership right here, but gathering as many perspectives as we can is really, really important to the process, because we want to make sure that no one feels like they've gone unheard. We've heard that before. There's aspects of our membership that say they feel underserved, they feel undervalued. We want to make sure we get that input, because if it only comes from us, it's a very two-dimensional perspective. We need a three-dimensional representation of what PMEA is. I mean, I think about the presentation we had yesterday at Penn State, where we had 12 speakers all around us, and the difference between what a stereo sound is and then something that is totally immersive. We need a plan that is more immersive, something that embodies what we do, totally across the board.
So let's move on from strategic plan, but kind of just tying off of that, in the strategic plan for the past few years, there has been an advocacy piece as part of it. And, a lot of people might think PMEA is festivals and the conference, but there are so many other things that we do. And one of them is advocacy. I want to touch on a couple of the things that have happened in there related to the standards review. Who wants to take that?
So I can take that. So we actually have several people in this room right now that are part of the state's Arts and Humanities Standards Review. And a large group, I think it was 36 educators. We're talking about folks that are in music, visual arts, dance, theater, and media arts, coming together to review our current standards, both the national and the state standards, to rewrite our state standards. And the last time that they were revised was 2002. And we're talking about a generation of teachers that have had the same standards, and now we're moving forward. And the review process has really just beginning, and this is a long process. And there were about 36 educators in those disciplines that got together 2 weeks ago, and the 9 of us that couldn't be there 2 weeks ago that got together last week to be a part of it and review what they did the week before. And it's a very engaging conversation that everybody's having, and they really put together a team that stretches different levels across the state, both grade-wise. There's pre-K up through college, but there's also people that are just in their first couple years teaching, and people that have been in the classroom for the entire length of the standards and beyond. So we have a diverse group, and we're just starting. And really, this first step of the process wasn't even writing anything. It was reviewing. It was looking at what we're already teaching, what we already are using for the standards, and does it still reflect what we're doing in Pennsylvania? How can we change it to better reflect what we're doing in Pennsylvania? And we're comparing ourselves to other states and our standards to other state standards and the national standards. And it's really just starting the process of kicking this off. I think it's going to be about a 2-year process, and we're just getting started. But it's exciting that it's even starting. In that, because you got to start the journey to finish the journey.
And Mark, I think, tagging on that's been just the beginning of that journey, but how did it get to this process of 22 years it took to have these standards review? And this is one thing, as we're talking about kind of an update for PMEA and what PMEA has been able to accomplish over a period of time. PMEA as an organization, and I'll throw a star on you here in a quick moment, was a large part of the process to get these standards reviewed. It was the advocacy work, and specifically a lot of the work of our advocacy council, but also you as our Director of Public and Government Affairs, to have the pulse on what's happening in Harrisburg, but also what's happening in Washington, D.C. as well, because there were phone calls and conversations that were continuing to happen, not just in legislative offices, but in the hallways, in the parking lots, on the steps of the Capitol, to a phone call that says, hi, you don't need to call me, but you need to email this person's secretary. Following every little lead to get to the right people, to get the ear, to get the attention. And that work was happening in PMEA, but I've got to tell you, Mark, you've been a big process of that too, and I know you will brush this off, but we are very proud and honored that you are part of our staff, that this is something that we have full-time. Not many MEAs across the country, if any, have anybody like you. So when we hired you, I don't know how long it's been now, 5-6 years? that was a no-brainer for us to do that, and now we're finally seeing the benefits across the state outside of our organization too. But to know that you and our organization have been a large part of that. In fact, and I feel like I'm kind of controlling this interview right now, and I feel like Scott last year when he got to interview you. But in June at the NAFME National Assembly, the Leadership Assembly, PMEA was recognized and received the award for excellence in advocacy, which is an award that is given to MEAs or organizations across the country from the National Association for Music Education for their advocacy work. And it was coming from what we were able to do in getting those standards reviewed and updated that we were recognized through our national affiliation. And as a token of their gratification, we were able to stand in front of our colleagues from across the United States and beyond, and to be recognized, to get to share with them, and to converse with them. Honestly, that led to other additional conversations. How did you do this? And so to collaborate, but also those tokens of appreciation where they presented PMEA with a flag that was flown over the United States Capitol in May, and then also the physical award of the emblem that was given to us as well, that we can proudly display at our events and in our home office too. So it's nice to know that, yes, we can be proud, but that others are recognizing the work that we're doing too. So that's something that PMEA should be proud of. And as I look around the room, I'm seeing heads shaking, and that's something that every person can take part in. It's not just our staff, it's not just leadership, is that we can call our legislative leaders, the folks who are decision makers, and say, you need to consider this, and here's why. You need to hear our stories. It takes every single one of us, and without sounding preachy, if we had 3,700 members doing that, that's a large force of people to make an impact on Harrisburg. And imagine if those 3,700 people took one person with them. We doubled it. So again, I get off that soapbox. It's important work, but it's going to take those sometimes tiny conversations or an email. And it's very simple to do.
Yeah, and I'll just so you understand, I'll briefly go into the hood of how we did this. We've been having the conversations, as Brett said, for a long time with leaders at PDE, with leaders in the legislature, about how do we get the standards finally reviewed. And one of the pieces of the puzzle was we brought together folks from all of the arts organizations and the humanities, because they are the arts and humanities standards. So we brought together all these people, did some brainstorming to answer a couple questions. Do the standards need reviewed, and why? We didn't say at that point what they should be, but do they need, and why? And we basically came up with a white paper and then shopped that around to everyone who would listen, who could potentially be a decision maker, and became enough of a squeaky wheel that they couldn't say no. And that's kind of a lot of what advocacy is, being endearingly annoying in some instances. Sometimes I'm just the annoying part. Hopefully I do the endearing part too. But that's how this happened. This didn't just happen in a year. This has been in process for years to get to this point. That is how advocacy works. And PMEA has had the commitment for many, many years, well before I was even part of it, about advocating. And that is all of you. That is everyone watching this. That's everyone in the room. Brett's point is very valid. Your role is so important in that. And we're also very lucky that we have a great working relationship with other arts education associations that we are meeting regularly about any number of issues, like what's your conference like, but also these advocacy issues. So that's kind of something for you all to know, that there is a lot of that stuff happening behind the scenes. So
yeah, and just to add to that too, just as another update of what PMEA is doing, Mark and I, and actually soon to be Becky too, are meeting with those arts leaders. It's been almost monthly for quite a period of time, which is called the Pennsylvania Arts Educators
Leadership Coalition.
Leadership Coalition, PAELC for short. And we did a bunch of events this past year. We went to the PDE SAS Institute conference that was held at the Hershey Lodge, where we did a presentation as a collective whole on what our organizations can offer to school leaders and folks within the schools, even just as educators. And then we also partnered with Dave Dietz and his partner at PDE to talk about how the arts could support structured literacy as well. So that was a portion of that work that we did. And then we also, in addition to our own advocacy day in March from PMEA, the arts ed leaders and members met in Harrisburg on May 7th to have an arts ed advocacy day as well, which actually featured student voices at the podium, not just the leaders, and featured one of our own members in our students band from Exeter Township with Lorraine Selke, who's in this room today. You see her back there. So her marching band met us there, and they marched all the way out to the front of the Capitol. We created the scene, gathered some attention, but also gathered some attention for arts as a whole and how we could collaborate that day. And, noticing that, again, when we strengthen ourselves in those partnerships, not just in music, it serves our goals and our purpose, at the educational value for what the arts are.
So we have a couple other big topics I want to get to, and being cognizant of time with that too. So to your point, you did a little bit of a recap there of some of the things that we did. Since this is the PMEA update, recap of some other things that have happened through the year.
I can talk a little bit. So last year when we got together and had our first leadership summit, we asked the members, what would you like to see? And we wrote everything down. And what do you see as our strengths, our weaknesses? What are we missing? And we wrote it all down. We looked at it throughout the year. And one thing that we've been hearing, and we heard a lot last year, and we've heard it for years, was the need to look at adding ensembles. And do we need a treble ensemble? Do we need a strings ensemble? Could we be doing more across the state with some elementary and middle school offerings at the all-state level? And so we formed a task force, and we've spent a good part of this year, and there's people in this room that were on that task force, and we spent a good part of this year reviewing those things, doing some real research and deep dives. I've talked to MEA leaders. I think I have information for 42 out of 50 states on what they're doing in their states. What does that look like? How can we add those, and how do we have room to add those? So there's been really great conversations happening. And if any of you know me, I've probably sat down and talked to you about this because I talk to everybody about this. But I feel like these great conversations are coming out from ideas that we had last year at the Leadership Summit. So we are moving forward with those discussions, and proposals have come out of those discussions, and I won't get too much into that because that comes later, but we are definitely taking those things into mind and taking action on it. It's not just talking anymore. There's action happening on those ideas. And that was just one thing with the task force.
Well, and I think the idea that, matching up with our vision and our mission, if we're going to say that music is for all, that we need to be providing opportunities for all, not just in ensembles, but for the educators, and the educators at the elementary and middle school level, and higher ed, and our collegiate. So finding a way in which our organization can serve more people as well effectively, and doing that soul searching has been part of that process. Going back very simply, and actually not very simply because it takes a lot of work, this past January, we celebrated the 5 years of the Crescendo Virtual Student Music Conference. So 5 years of that going strong, and the folks and the individuals, the professionals, the learners, the leaders, to be able to impact our students directly within their own schools. And when we talk about those students, I know we've gotten back to some of the data, and some of it's hard to gather because a lot of the schools who are participating in the Crescendo Conference are showing it to classrooms, and some of it for the entire day. So we can only estimate how many students in a school are doing that. We know how many schools are participating, but ultimately how many students are receiving the benefit of that Crescendo Music Conference for very low cost, to get those experiences in the middle of the year without having to travel and get bus and transportation. So, I know there's additional conversations that are happening on how to expand that even further to other grade levels as well. And so we're excited to be celebrating that, but excited to go, like, we're not done, to continue those conversations. And then just to add to, and I know Becky's probably about ready to share this, the numbers at the conference. Do you want to hit that?
Yeah, we had a really successful conference this year, and it's very exciting. And I mentioned this a little bit yesterday to the people here at the Leadership Summit. We've really been looking at data. We've really been looking at numbers. We're collecting information, and we're using it now. And we looked at the data from our conference this year. And I have to say, a lot of this is in part to the hard work done by our PD Council and Martha Heiss, their chair, and everything that they're putting together for those offerings at the conference, in the success that we're seeing. So last year we had 14,000, not 14,000, that would be crazy. 1,400, yeah, 1,400 attendees at our conference. But we also had about 1,500 people, if you count all of the students and directors, that come as a performing group. So 1,400 attendees, 1,500 performing people that were performing, students were performing and their directors. We have the 760 some, 670 some, wow, 670 some all-state kids. But we had, out of those 1,400 attendees, 600 of them were collegiate students. So bringing in those college students to be a part of this event, I think is such a great sign of our future, because they come in, they participate now before they're in the workforce, and they see the value of PMEA, they see the value of the conference, and I love that. So these are numbers we're looking at. We are already really, really excited because last year we had 75 performing groups, around 75 performing groups that auditioned, that put in their proposal, and this year we have 119. We usually have around 150-ish proposals, and we are at about 250-ish proposals. Yeah, for next year. The entire thing, success begets success, and it just encourages it to happen and get bigger. And it's in a really great place. So our conference was very successful this year. So that was a big win.
So we only have a couple minutes left. I want to kind of rush through a couple things just so we get to it. Can you talk a little about Modern Band?
Yes. So Modern Band is something that the Spec Council approved, and then the board approved to start happening at the 2026 conference. And we are in constant talks on how that's going to look. It has been 2 years of planning. We're starting to get there. I always like to tell people that ask me, what's going on with Modern Band for Allstate? And I always like to tell them, we are all on the same page. We're not quite reading the same paragraph yet, but we're going to end that page together. The big thing I want everyone to know is we have solid plans in place for what that audition process is going to look like, and also when it is going to happen. And it is going to follow the same timeline as Allstate Jazz, Allstate Contemporary Vocal Ensemble. So that is already in the works. That information will be out the same time the other ensembles are out. So it's just the finishing touches that we're trying to put on everything, and we're continuing the showcase as well.
Yeah, and just the logistics of what adding any type of ensemble, whether it be Modern Band, to an already existing conference and festival is where I would say, if anything has gotten hung up. It's not really hung up, it's just trying to maneuver it into an already existing structure. And so, we, even tonight at our board meeting, we're approving additional Allstate guest conductors or clinicians for Modern Band, so that we have a broad list and a very diverse list of folks to be able to, that we can ask and hire as clinicians to moderate that ensemble. We do have a host school within the Poconos, who was very excited to be able to do that, and I believe it's somebody we haven't really utilized in the past, but they were anxious to do that for us too. So things are just ready, lining up at this point, and we're just ready to sign those papers and say, here's where it is, and look out. But again, that process is coming in the near fall with all those other ensemble auditions.
So we're about at time, but I just want to do kind of a wrap up, maybe from each of you, looking kind of to the future a little bit of the organization. I mean, just, quick thoughts from maybe each of you about what you see that is.
Sure. I know the folks in the room have heard me say this over the past 24 hours, but knowing where music education is currently, having conversations with our members and our leaders, PMEA and music education is on the cusp of a great change right now, and transformational change for that, because it's needed. You know, where we are looking at our systems, are they efficient? Are they effective for where we need to be? So I see that we are there, but we also have our community aligning to that vision and buying in and biting to that. Not that it has to be sold, but it tells you the people who are in at music education right now are right there and wanting this to see for the best of the people in which we're serving. And when I say people, I'm talking educators, students, and communities. So to have that there and to be ready for that, that's urged us to get these plans in order, to the point where we've taken the feedback that we've received over the past year and a half, actually a couple of years even too, but through this event and other conferences and events and surveys that we've taken, to be able to determine that direction, also see how that direction is going to possibly lead us and may lead us to reorganize or restructure in some way. And I'm not saying blow up the system, but look at things like bylaws, reviewing our bylaws, looking at job description, roles and responsibilities, not just of the roles that we have within the organization, but also how that works with our staff. You know, is our staff being utilized effectively? Are they robust enough to support this organization, or do we need to help our executive director and our staff to be able to support what we do? Not that, you know, things are in dire straits, but to be able to support that as they are, you know, working alongside of us day in and day out when we're in the classrooms. And so, you know, it's almost like everything's happening at once. And it's good because, you know, it's not just saying we're going to do this one time and then we're going to do this. You know, it's like, you know, putting a wheel on a car and then deciding to put the doors on. We're going to build this car and we're going to drive it. So it's led us to have those conversations, to be able to, again, do some self-reflection to set us up to do what we need to do for the why we need to do it and to do it effectively.
Becky, Scott, quick thoughts?
Well, I'm very excited. I have to say we have this conversation a lot, that there's an excitement about this organization right now. And I feel it at our conference. I feel it in conversations I'm having. And it's a very special time, I think, to be in PMEA. I'm a firm believer, as I said yesterday, that music is for everyone. And I believe that PMEA is for every music educator. And while we have these conversations, I want everyone to, as we've said several times, everybody's voice is valid. Everybody's passion, different parts of this organization is valid. And as we continue to grow and change as an organization, we want you to know that we want to hear back from all of you in the direction that we're going. Because these ideas are exciting and they bring upon more ideas, and that's what we need.
If there's one thing, and I'm going to bring up COVID, if there's one thing that whole situation proved, is that PMEA can be nimble and PMEA can be quick. And PMEA can come together to help each other out. And
You can jump over the candlestick.
that's true. And I think that has continued. So, I mean, I've been involved in some sort of leadership capacity with PMEA since 2007. And at that time, I'll be very honest, it felt like there was an in and an out. There was the club that was recognized, and there was the people who were not. And I don't think that's the case anymore. And that, to me, is thrilling. That's exciting. I think PMEA has an energy that was not there before that does now. You have two leaders right now who are anything but complacent. They are full of ideas, full of energy. I'm very excited for this is the last year for my commitment to the organization in this capacity. You know, Brett's going to have a great year this year. I'm really looking forward to what Becky's going to be doing. We're going to have elections coming up soon. Think about who you want to lead this organization, be it for band, orchestra, chorus, or president-elect. These are things that we need to start thinking about now for the future of the organization. But the change that I've seen over the years, I think it is really thrilling, exciting, and heartening to see the shift and the identity, I think, that has changed within PMEA.
Well, Scott, Brett, Becky, thank you so much for doing this, bringing us the relevant updates literally in the moment of what has been happening here. We appreciate this.
This is number 6 for me.
Oh,
so I want to thank you for
That's
help
right.
you make that possible.
That's right. So, okay, we have to get her I didn't get her a 5-timers club jacket, but maybe 10 we'll get you. How's that sound? All right.
I think that's like a massive ring.
Ring.
or
Okay,
something,
all right.
right?
We'll see if we can get that in the box.
Giant
I like that.
medal. Yeah.
But thank you all for being here for this, our first ever live studio audience. Thank you for being a part of this. We appreciate it. You can applaud yourselves. That's okay. And we want to thank all of you for tuning in to this special edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, the Grove City College Department of Music. We will see you next time.